Welcome to the Run Out. I am your host, Neil Barrett. What an absolutely incredible week this has been in the world of lacrosse. The NCAA tournament is in full swing. The NLL finals start tonight, and the PLL is a little over 1 week out from the start of training camp. What an incredible time to be alive and to be a lacrosse fan. On today's episode of the podcast, I am joined by WLL beat writer Caitlin McDonough. Caitlin is a Bostonian who finds herself in upstate New York at the Newhouse School on the campus of Syracuse University, one of the best sports journalism schools in the country. Unfortunately, like our friend Adam Levy, Caitlin is also a Liverpool fan. We do get into that a little bit today, but we can forgive her that one transgression considering how great her coverage of the WLL has been. Today, we talk about how Caitlin got into the game, how she found herself writing for the WLL. We talk a lot about the championship series, how it felt to be there, the impact of Charlotte North, and what fans watching on TV might not have known about being there in person at the championship series. Then we look forward to the future of the WLL and how it will alter the women's game moving forward. There is so much to get into, so without further ado, let's get into it. All right, we are here with Caitlin McDonough. Caitlin, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Neil. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about some lacrosse today.
Yeah, I am too. First of all, for anyone who doesn't know you, can you introduce yourself? Tell everyone who you are and why it's important that you're here, I guess.
Sure. So, my name is Caitlin. I'm a freshman up at Syracuse University studying journalism. And I'm currently a beat writer for the Women's Lacrosse League. I was able to go down to Virginia during the Champ Series and kind of just cover those games, give more of a perspective on the inaugural season. And I, write some articles and just interview some athletes.
That's awesome. I really enjoyed your coverage, and that's really where I started following you on social media was during that period. Before we get into lacrosse, I have a more pressing, urgent matter. I know, first of all, doing some research for this, that you are from the Boston area, and I know that you are a soccer fan. You played soccer. And so I was really excited because I've been playing. I knew I was going to ask you to come on the show a while ago, probably when you were kind of announcing that you were going to be a beat writer. And the whole time I was like, oh, I want to ask her about soccer. And about an hour ago, doing prep for actually writing out questions, I found out who it is that you are a fan of. And now I don't want to talk about soccer anymore.
Oh, no. What fan are you?
Manchester United.
I was going to say, I was either United or Everton. So I'm sorry. I am a Liverpool fan. It's a great season for us. So, hopefully we get it done next weekend against Spurs. But we'll see.
We talked a little bit before we started recording about Adam Levy, the NLL writer, and he's also a big Liverpool fan. And he's I was recording with him right after we beat Arsenal, and I told him that he was welcome for essentially securing the title for you guys. Unfortunately, not that we wanted to make that happen, but one thing that I did find also when I found that out that was very cool for me, and I can explain a little bit as to why, is that you one of your big heroes comes from soccer and is Rebecca Lowe, who is amazing. She's so good at what she does. And I saw that you actually, it's funny because I remember watching this. I don't specifically remember your part, but that you were actually involved in their fan fest when they did it in Boston in 2019, early 2019, something like that.
Yeah, I want to say it was like February of 2019 or something. And it was kind of just on a whim too. My mom just posted something to what was Twitter, I guess, back in those days. Now it's X. But
I still call it Twitter.
yeah, same, honestly. And she just posted a photo of me being like, oh, because I think at the time they were trying to figure out where they wanted, like what city they wanted to come to. And my
Mhm.
mom was just like, oh, please come to Boston. My daughter's a huge fan. And they ended up announcing they were coming to Boston. Someone from working at the league, I think, like DM'd her on Twitter or something. And we went back and forth, and they came and did an interview at my house. I talked about a little bit about Rebecca Lowe and, how I love watching her and look up to her. And we were actually at the fan fest, and the guy came over to us and was like, she wants to meet you so badly. And I was like, what? She wants to meet me, like everyone that's here, she wants to meet me. That's so cool. And yeah, he just took us right up to her, got a photo with her and everything, chatted. And, she ended up interviewing me live, which pretty much a very complete shock to me, because I just thought I was going to get a photo and that would be it, because I thought, oh, she's so busy trying to get to everyone. But it was definitely really cool. Sometimes every once in a while I'll send her a DM on Instagram and just we'll catch up a little bit like that.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. She's pretty awesome. I looked to see if I could find the clip of you being interviewed, and I couldn't find that, but I did find a social media post from there where they had you and several of the other fan stories kind of broken up into smaller things. And it was pretty cool to see. I also saw you met Seamus, who is a huge Liverpool fan.
Yeah, he's a huge mohawk, and he's a huge guy, and just like I think there was a photo of him too, and he was like flexing his muscles, and I was like, oh my god, like literally his arms basically the size of my head at that one point. It was totally insane, and oh my god, that was just such a surreal day. And just seeing him on Instagram and loving his fandom of Liverpool too, bonded over that, so it was really great.
That's pretty cool. We can use this kind of as a transition point into, actually, I take that back. We'll talk about the championship series later, but Rebecca Lowe, I remember like way back when they first got the NBC contract and she was in and stuff. And she's always been great, but I did during the championship series, I called it Gold Rush. I did a podcast every day of the championship series. And it was in large part kind of based on Rebecca Lowe's podcast with Brendan Hunt during the 2023 Women's World Cup. It was called After the Whistle. And I listened to that every day. It was like I was working in a warehouse at the time, and I would just throw my headphones in and just listen to it. And it was such a good kind of thing to like wet my whistle for the day. And then I would pull up my phone and have the games on during the rest of the day. And I had so much fun doing it that I was like, I want to do that for the championship series. So that's pretty cool. I love Rebecca Lowe, and it was really fun to see that. But obviously you are now at Cuse. I was wondering what went into that decision. Obviously they have a very good, specifically broadcast journalism, I think. And obviously, as stated, you would love to be Rebecca Lowe. But also, I know you're from Boston, and I know Boston also has some really great journalism schools in the area. So what was it maybe specifically about Cuse that made you want to go there?
Yeah, so for me, when I was looking at colleges, I kind of wanted to get a little bit out of my comfort zone, because I grew up in the city. I know Boston extremely well, and we have a lot of great schools in the area. So I definitely was looking at some of those schools, but I kind of wanted to challenge myself a little bit. And I really didn't figure out what I kind of wanted to do actually until I traveled to England to watch the Women's Euros. Saw England win them and lift that trophy at Wembley was really cool. And I met someone who worked for Copa 90, which was like an English media outlet.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of showed me the ropes a little bit, and I thought that was really cool. So from then I kind of just started to look at the degrees, and there was a couple in Massachusetts and kind of in New England that I was looking at. And then I found out about Syracuse, and I did a lot of research on them, and they had, one of the top schools in the country, if not the best school for broadcast journalism. And so I think it was the summer going into my senior year of high school, I went up to visit. They have something called an Orange Preview Day, which is basically, your whole day is kind of jam-packed. You go look at different parts of the school, and you just got involved in a lot of different organizations that you can meet people as well. And I remember stepping on campus and specifically stepping into Newhouse, which is my home college where I study. And I just got that feeling where, wow, this is where I want to be. Like, I felt like I belonged here right away. And that was that feeling that I hadn't had with any other school that I visited. As soon as I walked in those doors, I was like, this is the school that I'm going to. Like, I just felt at home. And I didn't have that feeling with those other colleges. So I knew kind of right then and there that I'm going to work, really hard to get into this school. And I applied early decision, and luckily it all worked out. I was able to get in. One of my soccer teammates, her grandmother went here, so I was talking to her a little about the school as well. And everyone that I talked to that had an affiliation with the school, they just loved it so much. They had nothing but positive remarks about it, and I really just felt really excited to apply. And when I got in, I knew, like, all right, this is definitely where I'm going.
Uh, and what has that kind of experience been like there? I know you played lacrosse, you played soccer. We talked about soccer. We will talk about lacrosse. I don't know a ton about Syracuse's soccer teams. I think they're fairly good. Do you get to cover them? Do you get to be involved in them? And obviously we know Syracuse lacrosse is Syracuse lacrosse. So yeah, do you get to cover them at all?
Yeah, kind of a little bit. I remember in the beginning of the semester when they were playing, I would kind of just go as a fan. And as it got later on into the semester, we have something called a studio show, which is basically where we do sometimes pregame, but almost always halftime and postgame. And so when they started saying that, hey, you can come down and help work the soccer games, I was immediately impressed. And I said, I'm definitely going down here. This is my jam. This is my sport. And so I would just help kind of do little things, whether it was taking down stats. Sometimes I'd be on the social team where I'd be interviewing some of our executive producers or just kind of getting a feel of what the studio is like, but definitely covering them and just kind of giving a little bit of information on what's going on. And that was something that's really cool because at other schools, you can't really get that hands-on right away, but here it's, they want everyone to come down, and it's such a great atmosphere and a family. So I always made it my goal to go down to basically every single, soccer show. And now we have lacrosse shows as well, and I always go down to them too.
Yeah, that's so fun. I worked a lot of broadcasts in the North Carolina area where I'm from, and High Point University, and some other schools in other sports, but especially at High Point, I did lacrosse there, and I don't know, it's so much fun. I always thoroughly enjoyed doing those shows, and we didn't even have like I've seen some of Syracuse's like post game kind of studio show style stuff. We didn't even have that. It was just kind of game broadcasts, and even that was so much fun. So I find myself a little jealous. How then did you get connected with the WLL? Was it just as simple as, you saw the ad and you applied? Was there any kind of previous connection or whatever? And then what has that experience been like? As you said, a college freshman kind of, I don't know if you're the beat writer, but you're one of the bigger beat writers for the WLL. Like what has that whole thing been like?
Yeah, so I mean, it's like you said, back in the day, I guess people would, take an ad of a newspaper and apply, but now it's all digital. So, there's a website called Teamwork Online, and there's a bunch of sports jobs that you can go on there and you can filter your preferences. And I just got weekly emails of what kind of jobs were open, and I saw that I think it was the Maryland Whipsnakes beat writer position was open, so I applied for that. I talked with the person that was hiring, who put me in touch with someone else that was hiring as well. And they said, oh, thank you for the interview. Like, we'll get back to you probably sometime next week. And I was like, okay. And I left the interview feeling pretty confident. And he called me back and was like, oh, hey, just because you're a freshman, you don't have as much experience as some of the other beat writers, which is totally reasonable just because I'm a freshman. I think that was the beginning of my second semester. So, but he was like, we're still impressed with a lot of the work that you do. So we want to give you this opportunity to cover the WLL, especially because, I played lacrosse in high school. So I was familiar with the sport, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. And, basically signed the contract. And from then on was just kind of put in touch with some of the other representatives of the leagues and just kind of got my feet wet and started writing some articles. And yeah, it's been a really great experience ever since.
That's awesome. Like I said, your kind of writing during the championship series was so fun to read. Speaking of the championship series, obviously it's a new format. Like you said, you played lacrosse, but sixes being what sixes is fairly new. And in my opinion, that the WLL championship series format is the most enjoyable version of sixes that I have ever seen. I guess I have kind of two questions. First is your personal view on sixes and the WLL version of it, and then the second half is kind of, I guess, what's your sense of everyone else, the players, the fans, even the league. Clearly, I don't think anyone could say it was not a success. I would imagine that it was, but do you think people were surprised at all? I think it's been kind of borne out, especially over the last few years, that when you invest in women's sports, like, you're going to get a return on that investment. So in a lot of ways, I don't think it was all that surprising, but even still, it felt surprise. I mean, some of the crowds for Charlotte North and stuff were really surprising in a lot of ways, even though they probably weren't that surprising in a lot of other ways. So
Yeah, I mean, my personal viewpoint was I thought that the tournament was going to be good. I thought it was going to be definitely an adjustment period for a lot of the players and coaches, especially just because sixes is such a different game than field lacrosse. And I was kind of just wondering, how successful would the game be? Would we still see a high scoring, fast game just because of the shot clock? And we absolutely did. And I wasn't the biggest fan of sixes coming into it just because I was kind of thinking it's just like such a fast paced game that maybe some of the tactics, like the tactical aspect of it, especially on defense, wouldn't kind of be there. I thought it would favor more of the attackers or midfielders a lot more, but it's completely the opposite. I mean, we saw a bunch of defenders and even goalies just have unreal games day in and day out. And just from the players' side of it as well, just hearing them talk about their experience, they absolutely loved playing sixes because it taught them to be very versatile and add new skill sets that they wouldn't previously have done before. Like you saw with Izzy Skane, she never really played defense in her life. She was basically just attacker the whole time. But she was leading, the New York Charging in caused turnovers, ground balls. She was doing it all, and she really embraced the defensive aspect, and she absolutely loved it. I don't think she'll convert to midfielder while she'll play defense, but I mean, who knows, maybe. But the players were just they were just mind blown that, I think a lot of the fans alike just really took to this league. And you mentioned the sellout crowds. Being there in person and witnessing that was one of the best feelings in the entire world because it was so loud in there and just the energy from the fans were reverberating back onto the players, and it made them play, I think, a lot better and a lot faster, even as they already were. And I mean, I expected the league to be very successful, but I don't really think I expected it to be that successful that quickly, especially because it was, I wouldn't say it was a random week in February, but, it kind of started on a Tuesday, ended that Monday. So I thought that maybe other people wouldn't really watch it. They just kind of would watch it more so if they had time during the week. But on the weekend, that was a huge crowd, but there were huge crowds throughout the entire week. And that was just something so, so cool to see. And everyone that I spoke to at the event in the league, they were just so happy and proud. And it was one of the best experiences that they had just because everyone there was so friendly and they were so invested into making this just such an impactful thing. And we kind of just saw a trickle down effect, and now more and more kids are playing lacrosse and having more and more idols to look up to. And it was absolutely insane. The line for Charlotte North's autograph. I remember I was walking out of the game, walking to the press conference, and I just see this huge group of people. And the way that the tournament was set up, it was at the St. James, and that's a very multi-purposeful event. So that you've got like a hockey rink right across from the lacrosse field, and then some gymnastics and indoor basketball facility. And so I thought originally that it was just a bunch of, players waiting to get on those courts and on those fields. But then I saw all the Charlotte North jerseys and I was like, wow, this is absolutely insane. Like, just to be there. And I just, at my viewpoint, I was just walking above the crowd, and it was just insane. It wasn't even just little kids either. It was just like teenagers, adults, everyone would just wanted, just a glimpse and an autograph of Charlotte North. And that was really, really cool to see.
Yeah, no, that was crazy. And two things strike me when you were talking. One of the things that was why I liked the WLL version about it was because, unlike I think the PLL and most, the international versions and stuff that I've seen, there was, I thought a lot of defense being played. I don't know if it's specifically because of the women's game, and less pads and people. I don't know what specifically it is, but there was just something about it. It reminded me a lot more of basketball defense, and people, especially the PLL game. Sometimes you just there are moments, I think, of very good one-on-one defense in the PLL version, but in the WL version there was just so much. I felt like a much better grip on kind of team defense and playing it, and you didn't necessarily see those like 24, 25 point games. So goals felt a little bit more important, big swing plays. I don't know. There was something about the speed. And one of the things that I have not liked about sixes overall is the lack of variable in the game. The game is kind of always at one pace. It's just always flying. And the WLL had a little bit more of those kind of like up and down moments where, yeah, you might get a minute or two of up and down, up and down, up and down, but then it would slow down and you get a little bit more half field and stuff. So I don't know, there was something about that. And then, like you said, I went into it thinking it would be successful. I went into it thinking the WLL would be fun and stuff, but was completely blown away by just how successful it was and how, there was the snowstorms early in the week that probably did keep some people away, but it was surprising at how many people were like, no, we're going anyway. And then, the lines for Charlotte and stuff, obviously, you can't really, look past that. She is kind of the it girl. There were so many comparisons to Caitlin Clark, and on one hand, it's like, it feels lazy, but on the other hand, it's like, I mean, it is very apropos of the moment and stuff. So, you get it. I'm wondering who's someone. Obviously, there were so many kind of breakout stars, especially I think, and this is a little bit of naivete and probably ignorance on my part of like not having been super invested in the women's game prior. So in a lot of ways, it felt like almost everyone was a breakout star because, so many people were unknown. But there was obviously the Emily Harris Chucks and Taylor Morenos and Ali Mastroiannis and stuff that really kind of made bigger names maybe than some other people. I'm wondering who's someone that maybe didn't grab those headlines. Obviously, Sydney Black game one, clearly shoots out to the top of everyone's list, but who's someone who maybe didn't grab those headlines that you were really impressed by?
I was really impressed by Kendall Halpern of the New York Charging. The Charging had, I think, the best defense for a large portion of the Champ Series, and that, Coach McGarity said she was the anchor point for them. They came into the tournament, I think, only one defender, which was the least out of any in all of the teams. And her ability to kind of just, anchor down that defense and explain to her teammates, hey, this is what we need to do in this situation. If someone's coming down, and we have, like one less defender, this is kind of how we play it out. And I think she had the most caused turnovers out of any defender or anyone on the field. And I think a lot of her work was done kind of in silence because with sixes format, a lot of praise goes to the attackers and, oh, this person scored this goal, oh my goodness. But I think for her, the defense of the New York Charging really carried them throughout a lot of the series. And, you kind of saw that with Madison Doucette as well. She was someone that really came into her own and was one of the best goalies all series. But I think Kendall Halpern, for sure, she become a silent killer. Remember, there was that one game against the Guard, and it just seemed like no one really could get past her. She would be playing phenomenal defense, and she would always match up against the top superstars on the other team, and she would shut them down for large portions, so much so that they kind of had to create a game plan around her, whether that was setting picks or just kind of moving the ball so fast that they created favorable matchups. But she was someone that I think went extremely under the radar. And I think as each game went on, she just had a better and better game. She led the team extremely well. Her communication was phenomenal. Just being on the sideline and listening to the things that she was saying. She was very, very vocal and very encouraging as well. I think that was super important because she did recognize that a lot of her teammates didn't really play defense before, and this was the first time that they were going to be matching up against people, and especially stars, of like an Emily Harris-Chuck and Charlotte North caliber, where they're going to score. It's inevitable, but it's about, hey, they get one, that's fine. They're supposed to score. It's just about how can we frustrate them as the game goes on so they don't get 6 or 5 goals, right? We only limit them to maybe 2 goals to where they have to rely on their teammates to get goals and them shutting them down. And I think she was a player that did very, very well. And the lacrosse world, I think, has been put on the radar for her, I guess I would say.
Yeah, we talk a lot about I think just generally we're in an era in kind of all sports, but especially in lacrosse where defense just doesn't get the recognition that it oftentimes deserves. And especially I think in sixes, it's so hard to even notice defense. And we had a big conversation at the end of the championship series about like how do we appropriately recognize the defensive contributions of players. And especially, I was so blown away by the goalies across the board. Like you said, you mentioned Madison Doucette. I talked about Taylor Moreno earlier, but even like Kaylee Waters, I thought she was incredible. The results didn't necessarily show that on the field, but she was so good all tournament. And even that, I think it's in a lot of ways easier to see a goalie performing well than it is a person who's playing, defense, especially again in a style like sixes. So I like that. I like that shout, and I don't know what the answer is. I don't even want to ask you because that I feel like that's putting you on a spot, like to try and solve an issue that is kind of, problematic. Like I said, across not just lacrosse, but we talk about it in all kinds of sports. But yeah, I wish that there was a way that we could appropriately. We talk about it all the time with like JT Giles Harris in the PLL, and in a guy that doesn't necessarily cause a lot of turnovers, but is just like a lockdown one-on-one kind of defender. And how do you appropriately reward what he's doing on the field and how it's impacting the success of his team without, I don't know what the answer is. I wish there was a better way for that to take place.
I think the thing about defense too, where it's different from offense, where offense, is purely, I think, a stat-based kind of scenario where it's this person has this many goals, this many shots, this many assists. But for defense, it's more so, you're judged solely on if you can, keep goals from going in the net. And I think that's hard because that doesn't tell the full story. I mean, neither does sometimes on the offensive side as well. But I think a large part of what defense is, it's about your positioning, and it's kind of about the way that you set up your team. And I think going for lacrosse, it's tough because it is such a high scoring game that people are always like, oh my goodness, they're so good. But with the defenders, if they can string together a couple of stops. That doesn't go as recognized just because people
Mm.
kind of assume the offense is not having a good game right now. They're not figuring out, but no, credit the defense, right? They set up, they're sliding to the ball, they're frustrating the offense, they're creating double teams, they're really taking away the space, and they're either playing a man or a zone defense that's not allowing passes to get inside the crease or near the crease at all. So when they can't score, and I think that's the thing about defense is you don't really have those stats unless you have, caused turnovers and ground balls.
Mm.
And I think that's a tough thing as well because as defenders, you're not getting assists, but as, attackers and midfielders, you can get a caused turnover or a ground ball. But I think a large part of it is just positioning. And that's maybe why I think defense doesn't get as much credit as it should.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, back to JT Giles Harris, he's that one-on-one guy, and I think a lot of times he doesn't get the stats because he can either kind of prevent a person from even getting the ball, but also he can be the one that plays his defense perfectly and rolls his guy into a double team that then that guy gets the cause turnover, the ground ball, whatever, and his kind of contribution doesn't go to anything. So yeah, it's tough. Like you said, offense is much easier. I think, like you said, you're at Syracuse right now, and we talk again, men's lacrosse here a little bit different, but Joey Spallina is a guy that has had some games where he didn't necessarily contribute points wise, and people are like, oh, see, he's struggling, he's doing this, and then it's like, well, if you watch what he's doing, like he's still playing really well. So like you said, there can be a little bit of that on offense, but yeah, it's not even close to the level that it is on defense. Back to the championship series, I'm wondering what, like you said, you were there, you were covering the entire event, and got to see a lot of kind of the ins and outs and what was happening. What was your favorite moment covering the event, whether that was something on the field or off the field, something that was kind of publicized or wasn't, or what kind of stood out to you?
I think one of the biggest things that stood out to me was just how involved everybody was on the sideline. I just think back to the Molly Liberty incident and her iPad, where she was the one that was not getting playing time all series long, but she didn't just kind of sit on that bench and just, be a cheerleader. And, she was actively participating, watching every single angle. And she was basically a ref's worst nightmare, simply to put. As soon as that challenge flag went down, there was really only one result that was going to happen, and New York was going to win. And I think it was just little things like that where everyone was so invested in the role that they were playing that they wanted to do everything in their power to help their team win. And I thought that was just such a cool moment, seeing that you can make an impact from the bench, because I think that's one of the things, and especially in sixes, where everyone's kind of subbing on the fly. They're going in and out of the sub box, but those people that don't get as much playing time, they're still really involved in the game. And I think that was really cool to see the trust, because there was only two coaches. So maybe the one coach is focusing on the offensive side and one coach is focusing on the defensive side. But it's those little kind of tiny details that a lot of coaches emphasize that help them win games. And that was something that helped her team win a ton of games, because every possession matters. And especially in sixes where, you have a 30-second shot clock, where if you're not having a good game, you can go on so many runs just because you're getting the ball back so often. But ensuring that you're getting the ball more than the other team is so important. And I think that was just a phenomenal moment to see. And, when she held it up to the crowd, everyone cheered. And so I don't think some people realize what happened, but from, that kind of moment, I started watching her a little bit more, and she was literally glued to her. I kind of joked like, oh, she's an iPad kid, but no, literally she was scrubbing through all of the camera angles, just trying to help her team out every single way. And I think, the bigger picture of that was just every single person on that sideline was just so invested in doing everything in their power possible to win games, especially if they were on the sideline, because no one wants to be on the sideline in a game, right? Everyone wants to go out there and play, but there was just such, that atmosphere, that feeling where it was, if I can't help this team on the field, I'm going to be doing everything in my power off the field to do it. And, there were so many players that were coaching on the sidelines as well. And there was that really big trust element that I thought was really cool to see. Everyone completely trusted everyone. And I think Courtney Taylor said it best one time too, where it was, if my team is on defense and someone slides too early, well, that's the decision we make. I'm going to trust their judgment and I'm going to back them up. I'm not going to be like, what are you doing? I'm not going to overreact. It's, you just stay in the moment and just help them out. And I think that was one of the biggest storylines I'll take away. Is just everyone was just so invested in setting their team up for success and basically doing whatever possible they could to do it.
Yeah, she was what, 3-0 on challenges over the course.
I'd say she was perfect on challenges.
Yeah, she was awesome, and she, like you said, she was right there on top of every single decision, and they've really trusted her with that too. The last thing that you said reminded me, one of my favorite. I'm a big Duke guy, and one of my favorite things, John Danowski runs coaching clinics in the fall. He usually does one a month from like September to December or whatever. And I used to go to them a lot because I was coaching at the time. And he had a thing. He used to always say, like, the thing that they preach to their defensive guys is, whether you're right or you're wrong, you're right. So like, go and everyone go with like follow that through. So I love hearing that in a slightly different thing. But yeah, I think it's so important, because that hesitation will kill you. Not making the slide, making a slide early is better, and having everyone follow through on the back end is better than being like and kind of half going. So yeah, no, that's funny. I know that you're you're there as a journalist, and you're not really supposed to take sides, but being from Boston, it was a pretty good week, right?
Oh, it was, one of the best weeks ever, added another title town, as they would say. And I did try and go into it with an open mind, being like, well, I'm not going to care too much who wins. But as the series continued, I was like, come on, Boston, like, let's go, like, let's win, let's do this. Every single game that they were playing, I was just like, come on, get that win. I can't really say this out loud, but, I want you to win. I want you to win the whole thing. And yeah, it was so cool. And I wish it was a little bit warmer out, not being in February or March, because I'm sure that there probably would have been some sort of duck boat parade throughout the city. And, maybe if the Celtics win, I don't know, I hope they do, maybe the Guard can join them. But it was, yeah, definitely such a cool experience, because I'm pretty spoiled, seeing how many titles that, Boston sports teams have brought home, and to have them win the first one, that was something I'll truly just never forget.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool to me how much, obviously we'll see how it works with PLL and obviously WLL. But I remember the first time I came up here, we talked a little bit off air, but my wife is from New Hampshire. We're about an hour outside of Boston. And the first time I ever came up here, probably 2020. Oh yeah, it was during COVID, because we had a mess of a time in Boston because everything was closed. But we flew, and when we flew back to North Carolina, I couldn't believe in the airport in Logan, where they have all of the banners of all the championships that are won. The Cannons banners are hung up there. They're included as part of it. And that like blew me away that such a minor sports championship would be counted amongst all of the Patriots and Celtics and Bruins and Red Sox banners up there. I was like, whoa, that is crazy. So part of me kind of laughs when you're like, yeah, they might have done a duck boat if it had been warmer. But part of me is also like, I mean, they really may have. They really do just like love, if you have Boston on the front of your chest, they don't care what it is. They're all in for it. So that's pretty cool. And I felt pretty good, because again, I didn't know a whole lot coming into it. I knew that I am now a New Englander, at least part time. and I knew Charlotte North. So I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing here, but I'm going to pick the guard and ride with the guard. And every day when we were doing Gold Rush, I would update. And every day it was like, I haven't seen anything that makes me not think the guard are going to do it. And then I think I did maybe, I can't remember. I should look that back up. I can't remember. I at least very seriously considered not picking them the last day. I don't know if I ever actually did or not, but yeah, it was pretty good. It was pretty fun. I imagine being the Boston Kid, both the guard and the cannons, getting the double championship was pretty good. Moving slightly forward, it was announced shortly after the championship series that the PLL All-Star Weekend in Kansas City this year would be played at CBKC Stadium, which is the first stadium in the world purpose-built specifically for a professional women's team of any kind in any sport. It was built for the Kansas City Current of the NWSL, and the PLL All-Star Weekend will include a WLL All-Star game after the skills competition on Friday night. Can you talk about what the location means to the WLL and the players of the league, and maybe what it kind of signals about kind of the future of the league to its fans and players, I guess?
Yeah, I think having it in Kansas City in that stadium where it is specifically designed for a women's professional team, that just shows how much investment that women's sports are getting, and the significance of that is, off the charts, right? It just means so much that the women's lacrosse league is going to be playing in a women's professional stadium, where if you were to tell someone that maybe 10 years ago, they probably would have thought that might not have ever happened, just because so many stadiums, a lot of them share it with the men's team. And it's just, it could be for convenience sake, or just because they don't, have the funding that to just put in a certain stadium just for the women's team. But having that there really, I think, just elevates the league even more. And just, being a soccer fan too, that makes me feel just so incredibly proud of the work that has come so far. And having it at that stadium, that whole atmosphere in that community will just grow even more. And, because it is at that stadium, it's going to be a great game, but it's going to mean even more. And I think it's going to be probably even better than the Champ Series atmosphere, just because it is at that women's professional stadium. And that's just really awesome to see that women's sports is growing in the right direction. It's been on this really upward trajectory in the past couple of years, and it's just going to get bigger and better. And, this, I don't know for sure, but this could set in stone maybe other teams, maybe certain WLL teams will now build their own professional stadium dedicated to just their WLL team, or maybe more professional leagues across the world will dedicate stadiums just to a women's professional team. So I think it's really cool, and it's something that is really unique as well. And I think that's the thing that I think of most when I think of the WLL, because the way that they've gone about the structure of this league, they really are listening to their players. They're listening to the people affiliated with the lacrosse community, and they're really taking their input and they're rolling with it. They're not just, shutting down any single thought. They're open to any idea and every idea, and they want you to just have your input. And if they can't make anything possible, they definitely will try and, kind of incorporate a little bit of your idea with someone else's idea. And just really a community atmosphere. And I think what the league is doing is great. And this could even set in stone maybe more teams, coming into an expansion. Maybe this goes and sets in stone next year. They have the championship series, but then after the champ series, they follow in the PLL's footsteps and have a summer series where, they can get more and more players involved instead of just having the 4 teams that they have right now.
Yeah. I when I read that was the first women's pro stadium, I was like, there's no way that's right? Like, there's no way. And I started thinking about all of the big women's teams, and I was like, no, yeah, they play in a stadium that was built for a men's team. Maybe the men's team doesn't play there anymore, but that's what it was built for, whatever. I was thinking about like the WSL teams over in England, and I was thinking about, Manchester United plays at Lee Sports Village, and I was like, as far as I'm aware, I think there is like a rugby team or something that plays there, but I was like, but no, that's their stadium. They play there. But then I was like, no, that it wasn't built for them. It wasn't. Again, they're not even the only occupant of it. I was thinking about all of the teams that I could think of, WNBA teams and stuff. That, yeah, like they don't have their own arenas and stadiums and stuff. So it blows me away that in 2025 we have one stadium that was specifically built for a women's team. And I I'm my hometown's North Carolina, and I my home state, I guess I should say, is North Carolina, and we had the Carolina Courage. I mean, we still have the Carolina Courage, and that they were the best team in the world in that like 2020-ish time frame, maybe a few years before. I mean, they were beating big time European teams and winning championships, best team in the world, and they were playing in at Wake Med, which was built for I guess the Railhawks back in the day that's now NCFC. It just blows my mind that some of these teams, Atletico Madrid, their women's team consistently can put like 60,000 people in what is it, the Stadium Metropolitano or whatever it is. And Juventus is another one that like can consistently sell out their men's stadium, and then they don't play. They don't have their own say. I don't know. It's crazy to think about, but I definitely see this as like a signal from the WLL and the PLL, as kind of their owners or whatever, as like a statement to say like that we are serious about this. We are investing in the future of the women's sport, of women's lacrosse, I guess specifically. And that was really cool to me to read. One of the things that I think I'm most excited about, it was the announcement that the WLL All-Star Game will be they say a new, but I think we all kind of are assuming that it is what the WLL game will look like in a 10-on-10 format, which is something that I've talked on the show about a lot. Like that's what I'm expecting, and kind of what I'm hoping to see was, it's probably going to be on a similar kind of PLL size field. I'd imagine they'll use a lot of the same lines. I imagine that it's probably kept fairly under wraps, even from a WL beat writer, and anything that you do maybe know, you probably aren't really at liberty to talk about. But I did want to say, like, is there anything, again, not necessarily looking for insider information, but like what do you think we can expect from that All-Star Game format, and how it shapes kind of the WLL going forward?
Yeah, I think something that you can expect, like you said, it will definitely be similar to a PLL kind of style, where it is 10-on-10. And I think you can see probably not as high scoring as it was during Champ Series, just because it's on a bigger field, more players. But I think you will see more and more people. I know we only have 4 teams in the WLL now, but I think what they're going to try and do by having this all-star kind of weekend is, I think they do want to expand, right? They want to have more than 4 teams, and maybe even branch out to, some more places like maybe the West Coast or kind of the Midwest type of area. And I think what you could probably expect from, the All-Star Game is just kind of like you would in a collegiate setting, or where something similar to the World Championship that kind of the Team USA is similar to. And I don't know who's going to coach the team necessarily. I don't know if it's going to be just a players kind of thing, or if they're going to bring the WLL coaches in. But I think you're going to see a large kind of thing that was similar to how they traveled to Japan to play those All-Stars, where it was, you're going to have a select group of people, obviously, that are going to be playing, and you're it's just going to be people from different kind of teams and different aspects, and they're all going to come together, right? They're going to play in this massive kind of thing. And I think it'll be a very tactical battle as well, just because they know each other really well, but they do want to win. Don't get me wrong. They're friends on and off the field, but when you put on that uniform and you're against someone else, there's no mercy there, right? You're going to go at it. So they're going to hit the ground running. And I think it's definitely going to be similar to, a Team USA kind of type of setup, where it's going to be really interesting how they're going to use some of the skills that they've used from the Champ Series and transfer it over into the outdoor setting. Because I think that was one thing a lot of the players were saying during the Champ Series is they have so many tools in their skill set now that when they step onto that field, I think you're just going to see more and more of a commitment to trying to use some of those skills, because there's no really point in just having a certain skill set just for kind of one type of game. So having them use like Izzy's game, we might see her play some more defense, and I think it's going to kind of be some testing the waters type of thing where, I don't think Taylor Moreno is going to take it all the way up the field and score a goal, but I just certainly wouldn't put it past her. But I think you'll probably just definitely see a really tactical battle, and something that's going to be really competitive and really great to see, and something that could set in stone what the future of the league looks like during the summer. And I'm most excited to see how people from each team sort of match up against each other. Like if you have teammates, what are some of their tendencies? How are you going to put them off guard? How are you going to make them maybe go left instead of having them go right or go down the middle? And I'm really excited for this game. Yeah, I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but I can certainly say if your team has Charlotte North on it, you might be in the contention to win. I don't know though.
Yeah. I was thinking about it when you said Taylor Moreno, but it probably counts for Charlotte North. The fact that you score a goal and you don't immediately have to turn around and sprint back to the other end of the field probably helps you. So yeah, I'm excited because I'm really interested in what the future of the WLL looks like. Like you said, I would expect that next year, if not next year, then certainly the year after. But I would probably imagine by next year, this is my own personal theory. You may know, you may not know. I think they expected AU to continue this summer, so they weren't planning on having a season this summer. So I thought they always were planning on doing some testing. That's what I kind of feel like the All-Star game is like, let's put a format out that we think is what the WLL will be playing, see how it works, make any kind of adjustments that we need to, and then go into more of a full season next summer. Whatever that looks like, I don't know if that's a full season or if it's kind of several tour stops throughout, or how exactly they do it. Like you said, there's only the 4 teams. But I'm excited to see what kind of that future looks like. It's going to be interesting to see it go from 6s to 10. Rosters are going to have to expand, obviously, which is great. It's going to mean more women are getting the opportunity. But also I think it gets into a little bit more strategy because, technically speaking, rosters will be, watered down a bit. I hate saying that because if you're playing at this level, you're a baller, but when you only have 6 people on the field, you just have a much more concentrated level of talent. It just kind of is a matter of fact statement. But yeah, I'm excited to see kind of the future. And then once that All-Star game happens, then you can sort of start looking at like, okay, who are and I guess this may be my next question. And I meant to ask you, I don't know how much you follow the women's game because obviously you're in school and you got a million other things going on. But I'm wondering, kind of projecting out, like, okay, we're going to start a team next, or kind of a more full league. Who are some people, that are coming out of college this year and or next year that can start fleshing out some of these rosters? And then, we don't know if Alex Ostholman is around by the time a league comes around next year, and some of these players who were maybe involved in the championship series this year but are somewhat older. It kind of blows my mind that Alex Ostholman is talking about retirement, because I'm like, you haven't even been playing that long. Like, what are you talking about? But people have different goals and ideas and stuff. And I was a big Taylor Moreno fan, Taylor Cummings fan. So when she retired, I was like, what do you mean you're retiring? Like, come on. People have different goals, and I think there's a really like fascinating kind of conversation that we can maybe have at a later date. We don't have to get into it today about kind of the expectations of women and in sports and motherhood and families and jobs and all that kind of stuff. That obviously play a factor in length of careers and decision making in careers and stuff, that don't take place in on the men's side of things. Marcus Holman's been playing a lot longer than Alex has, and he doesn't sound like he's getting closer. Obviously, I know that the WLL specifically put out those videos with the two of them talking about it. He's definitely getting closer, but it doesn't. It feels like she might have already been done, if not for the WLL. And I think you would think that Marcus has at least a couple more years left in him. So yeah, I guess if you can answer, do you have any answers on who you think could be? Not to put you on the spot there.
Yeah, not to put me on the spot, but obviously being up at Syracuse, I can imagine that they'd want someone like an Emma Ward to be on the team. What she's done, for the sport and for Syracuse in general. She's someone that primarily operates at X and kind of feeds the ball behind the cage, but when she's one-on-one on cage and does a crease roll, it's almost a goal every single time, and there's really no way to stop her. So it'll be interesting to see, if she does, and I'm wondering also if the WLL is going to do something to the PLL where they have kind of a college draft for players. And I think the league is in such an interesting position now because you have a bunch of former players who are assistant coaches, maybe even some of them are head coaches at university programs now or work at lacrosse in some capacity. How it's going to shape up, are they going to be eligible for the draft, or are they going to adopt something like the WNBA does where you have to, kind of be 22 or at least 4 years in college before you can declare for the draft, because the WNBA is really committed to having, their athletes and their players, get an education. So I don't know if, what the WLL will do, if they're just like, hey, if you're a freshman and you have a really stellar season, you can declare for the draft, or, you have to wait a certain number of years before you declare for the draft. But I think it'll be definitely, I can imagine that they might open up a draft as they kind of, maybe not next year, but in a couple years down the line, I can kind of see them following a similar path to the PLL as they open up a draft. And I think it'll be very interesting. And, because there wasn't that pathway for players, to kind of continue lacrosse. A lot of them would go into coaching now. So I think if they do have a draft, this would just kind of put more of an emphasis on players to, develop their craft more at a collegiate university. And, you might see more and more teams, something like Clemson, they're dedicating a whole facility for their women's lacrosse team just for them. Like, no one else can go in that facility besides their lacrosse team, which that huge. I think they're the first university to do that. And, they're going to have so much success in the future, and they're going to create the next generation of superstars. So by them having a draft, I think it'll definitely be interesting to see which former players, because the first person that kind of comes to my mind is Sama Puzo with the Boston College Eagles. She was a phenomenal player when she was in college. She's an assistant coach now, has been an assistant coach for a long time, but she still can get called up for the USA women's national team, even though she doesn't really play lacrosse anymore, but she's just so involved in the sport. So I can definitely see a draft coming in. And, I think Emma Ward, if there was a draft or someone, I think, just especially being at Syracuse, what she's done for the program, she could definitely do it. And another person that's tied to Syracuse is Delaney Schweitzer, the goalie. Had a phenomenal career, probably one of the best goalkeepers has ever played for Syracuse. So I think it'll be very interesting to see kind of the shakeup and to see if people put more of an emphasis on the offseason now, especially in lacrosse, because the offseason for lacrosse is just so interesting because you do have fall ball and then you kind of go right into the spring and over the summer. Maybe you're with the Team USA or you're kind of just training on your own. But I think the WL is going to kind of completely shake up how players now approach college lacrosse, knowing that they're going to still give everything, but I think players are going to, kind of keep in the back of their mind that, hey, I can go on to the professional level too, so I'm just going to do everything in my power, make those connections with other people just to see if I can get a crack at this league.
Yeah, the professionalization of women's lacrosse is going to be interesting because there have been pro leagues before, but something about this one feels different, and maybe that's just part of the PR of the PLL machine, and obviously they do a very good job of showcasing themselves and stuff, but it definitely feels like there is a transition from there being just kind of like a summer thing that women can play to there being like a real true like women's professional league. And you're right. I didn't really think about the fact that, a player like a Sam Apuzzo who, is kind of keeping herself in shape while coaching more so than being a professional player, and how that could change things. That's a interesting point that I hadn't really thought about. That is really all that I have for you. I really appreciate you jumping on, and I would love to have you back and we can talk, more WLL, hopefully successes. I will wait until after the English Premier League season because I don't want to hear about that championship anymore. But I would love to have you back anytime. We can talk. Like I said, maybe one of these days we'll have a deeper conversation about women's professional sports as a whole. That actually would be kind of fun for me. So maybe we can set that up. But again, thank you so much for joining us, Caitlin.
Thank you so much, Neil. I really appreciate it. Had a lot of fun coming on here.
And that is going to do it for this one. A big, huge thank you to Caitlin for joining me today. Liverpool fandom aside, I had a blast talking about the WLL with her and hope that she will come back over the summer to talk about the WLL at the All-Star game and anywhere in between that hopefully it pops up throughout the summer. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you are subscribed, leave a review, tell someone that you think might need to hear about it, all those things. It really does help this channel grow and get this podcast into the hands of more people, which helps us get better guests and build out this community of lacrosse fans. And that is really all that I am looking for with this podcast. So when you share it, it really does do the show a big favor, and I really, really do appreciate it. But I will be back soon with more lacrosse, more conversations about the game, and probably more than a few opinions that nobody asked for. So until then, I'll catch you guys on the internet.